My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Say community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the raspy dispatcher. If I have done my math correctly, which as someone who had to cheat through a lot of her math classes, which I'm okay with admitting because I told my backgrounder, this episode should be the last episode before 2025. And I'm super excited about it in general, but just reflecting on 2024, we have done some amazing things here at the Raspy Dispatcher. I got to do my first closing keynote out in Kansas at their state conference, APCO. We here on the Let's Talk Dispatch podcast have hit over 40,000 downloads between our podcast audio form and our YouTube channel. Our Let's Talk Dispatch private Facebook group only continues to grow. So if you have not joined that Facebook group and you are on the Facebook, head over there ASAP. It's such a positive and warm place to hang out as a current dispatcher, as a foreman dispatcher, and as an aspiring dispatcher. But we couldn't do anything that we do here without you folks liking, sharing, downloading, listening, tuning in, joining us as a guest on this podcast, sharing your experiences. So going into 2025, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for helping me build this community and making it what it is today. I had no idea what this would grow into starting it back in 2019, 2020. So hope you guys are all having an amazing holiday season going into 2025, and we look forward to seeing you then. Now, after all the mushy stuff, let's hear a word from some of the more amazing people who help us do what we do, our sponsors. Today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch is proudly sponsored by Prepared. Their mission is to be public safety's most assistive technology. Revolutionizing how we handle emergencies, Prepared is dedicated to saving more lives and making our communities safer. Learn more about how Prepared is transforming emergency response at prepared911.com. Our next sponsor is Zybex Media. Since 2020, Zybex has been creating impactful recruitment films for their customers. Zybex Media offers their expertise, providing a full range of media solutions designed to attract and retain talent for all PSAPs. Visit zybex.com/media to learn more. These partnerships help us continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. Interested in partnering with us? Head to theraspydispatcher.com. As always, thank you so much to our sponsors. If you're listening, check them out. We only partner with folks who do good work, so definitely head over to Zybex and Prepared to check out what they got going on their respective companies. Now, for today's guest, they are a dedicated peer supporter with years of experience in emergency services. They have served as a ski patroller, firefighter, EMT, and are a member of Utah Task Force 1. They'll be sharing with us insights on peer support, which is really a good time for this time of year, healing practices for first responders, as well as the importance of non-traditional therapies. My guest today, Jason. Hi, Jason.
Good morning, Ashley. Honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out and wanting to come onto the show and share your story.
Yeah, very cool, and thank you for doing this.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
There's not enough sharing that we can do.
Oh, we are all about sharing here. So we're probably gonna overshare for the next 45, 50 minutes. So.
No worries. Right there.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into public safety.
I stumbled into it. I think I was sort of predestined. some of us, if not many of us, experience different childhood traumas.
Mm.
And I watched my grandfather have a heart attack at age 6. And I think ever since then, I wanted to be able to do something about it. I kind of meandered. I mean, I went to high school and went to a decent college, have a degree in philosophy and religion. Moved to Utah because I thought I wanted to go to law school. Thank God I didn't get there. And and became a ski bum, if you will. And through that, I met a bunch of guys that were firefighters.
Mm.
And on their days off, they were skiing, and it sounded really cool. And I never really got my act together to like, okay, here's the test that occurs every 2 years, and time that with moving forward. Fast forward to 1997, and I'm looking for a fundraising job. I thought that was going to be my career. I'd done some volunteer work, some grant writing, and that was back in the days when you went through the classifieds in the newspaper. And to get to the fundraising, I had to go through firefighting. And I saw this, test for 4 departments: Salt Lake City County, West Valley City, and South Salt Lake. And I was like, what the heck? I'm not doing anything that day. Maybe I should take this test, and if I score well, that kind of shows that I should move towards an aptitude. It shows an aptitude or some direction or some reason. Anyway, I scored pretty well, but didn't get hired off of that list. Put myself through EMT basic school, joined the Deer Valley Ski Patrol, and then put myself through a private fire academy to increase my chances of getting hired. And at the end of the second list, I was the last class to get hired. So it was about a 4-year ordeal to get hired. It's kind of crazy sometimes the amount of time it takes to get a job in the fire service.
Yeah, I think in any, even dispatch, I mean, moving through that process can take anywhere from a year to 2 years as well. So I can only imagine how long and how many swings folks in the fire service are taking to get into a department.
Yeah, I coincidentally scored higher on my first test and first list than I did on my second test. But that was the list I got hired off of. So that's what kind of, led me into this career. I think I always sort of saw myself as a helper. And this was just a natural progression for me to formalize that desire and, to address that like helpless feeling at age 6 and like, hey, I can do something now.
Yeah.
So I think that's, mostly what brought me into the career. I'm super stoked it happened. I've had a lot of great experiences. I've also spent some time like a mountain bike patroller and had some national Norba races. I got to participate in the Olympics, done World Cup races. I'm bragging a little. Got to interface with the Secret Service when somebody special was skiing at Deer Valley. So I've had a fun life. Granted, there's been a couple traumas that have made it less fun.
Yeah.
I was diagnosed with PTSD in 2004 and was terminated for not being fit for duty in 2006. Kind of a bizarre process, but and I then had to start trying to heal myself. And after stumbling and bumbling around, I found a couple culturally competent therapists through the help of the Firefighter Behavioral Health Association. Now there's, more resources that can refer people to vetted professionals, but back then there weren't many. And 2009 went through the Save a Warrior retreat, cohort 091. In Simi Valley, California, which is a 5-day intensive retreat. And that got me to a pretty good place. And then I went through the Struggle Well experience through the Boulder Crest Foundation in September of 23. And that taught me how to try to be a better version of myself.
Well, I mean, for folks who are listening who, are dealing with, the weight of what this job as dispatchers, firefighter, EMTs, patrol officers, all across the board, we're all exposed to a certain level of trauma that the everyday person doesn't get exposed to. And we're also the last people to acknowledge it and address it and kind of grab it by the horns and start figuring it out for ourselves. And as someone who's gone through this experience where you were diagnosed with PTSD and it did lead to a termination for you, what is something that you might have done differently earlier to kind of help with dealing with those things that you were exposed to on the job?
It's kind of complicated, but I sometimes say that, God, if we would have devoted 4 hours of recruit school to meditation and breath work, maybe, wellness and mindfulness, depending how much time, but I've developed a very strong meditation practice. I do two 22-minute sessions twice a day of what's called warrior meditation. And I've been doing that since December 3rd, 2019. So meditation is a way to create resilience, or maybe some other techniques real quickly. And then there's a whole bunch of different breath work techniques, whether it's 4-7-8, 5x5 box breathing. I just learned a 4-2-4-2 rectangle breathing. I've done a 10x10x10x10 death breathing. But I think I've been taught skip breathing, which we're taught as firefighters. And to just have that as like an extra tool in my tool belt to decompress would probably be the most important thing that would have helped me out. I also wish there were like peer groups that exist today. Big shout out to my buddy Danny at The Process. He runs a great group. And the rest of the people that support us these days. There's a whole lot of more support and resources today than there was in 2004.
Yeah. I mean, even when I started in 2018, you mentioned having a conversation even during academy. They brought in our peer support folks to do they were probably there for at least 8 hours. They probably took a whole day addressing that aspect, the resources that they're there to assist and whatnot. And even on like graduation day, they brought them back and had them talk with our families about like, don't ask about tough calls and, things like that, and just kind of helping them kind of understand the level of exposure their loved one is going to be receiving in this line of work. So I definitely think even in the last 6 years for me, the level of acknowledging peer support is higher. Still got a lot of work to do. There are still some agencies that don't have peer support at all. But it's definitely becoming more of an accepted reality that we need peer support. Peer support is good for us. And I mean, why do you think peer support is so important for first responders in general?
Because we're all trained to help people during a time of crisis. And via that, we're exposed, whether it's audibly taking a call or visually being involved in the call, that most other people don't experience. And to do that job, I think there's a certain degree of mental toughness we confer upon ourselves. And it's hard to admit to the people that we serve that we're human. You know, that the four guys and gals showing up on the fire truck or in the ambulance are not superheroes, that they're humans. So I think that's, you know, an important component of the peer process is that we understand each other, you know, whether we're correctional officers, we're dispatchers, we're firefighter EMTs, we're EMS only, we're ATF agents, we're border and patrol agents, whether we're patrol dudes, whether we're detectives. We've all seen a lot of the same stuff. And the ability to share that with each other kind of creates a tribe of sorts. And that's so important in today's world where we are so alone. We're so isolated because of electronic devices. Mm-hmm. And that helps also foster connection amongst us. And ultimately, hopefully, that creates an environment where people are vulnerable. They can share. They can unload the proverbial backpack. You know, the model of the backpack full of traumas carry around. And, you know, in a meeting, they might be able to pull a rock out or two, or they might have a transformational enough experience where they dump the whole backpack out. They might go to a retreat and have that experience. I came up with this own like self-created forgiveness ceremony that has allowed me to like throw backpacks away on there. But I'm able to do that. I'm able to like take some risks, if you will, or explore different paths because I know I've got a bunch of people that know where I'm at and are there to support me. And part of our model, why we created the Paths of the Warriors, it was created by myself and two other friends, one a corrections officer and the other an active duty firefighter paramedic. And we wanted to provide a space that was really emphasized privacy and confidentiality. Because even with that interagency peer support group, at least based on my experience from 20 years ago, that whole like quickest way to communicate is what? Telephone, telegraph, firefighter. And so I don't know what different levels of trust are able to be established there. And even some like regional support groups where this person knows that person. There have been anecdotal stories of stuff getting back. So we wanted to create a space that was free of those entanglements, if you will, and something that continued to complement both of the retreats that I went through and my other friends have been through. We kind of like, hey, that wasn't great, and hey, this only lasted that long, and hey, man, we're showing up to see each other every week. Why not share it? So that kind of created the idea of like, let's just have a peer support group that's open to everybody. And the name of the Paths of the Warriors, the paths part is intentional in that there are many different ways or paths that we're on as part of our healing journey. And not every path is for everyone, is going to work for everyone. So part of our goal in the room is to share different things that work. And if it comes from a peer and a trusted person, it might be something that you'll try out. You know, you might, after hearing for the fourth or fifth or sixth time that meditation is cool, you might say, hey, I'm going to look at the YouTube video and I'm going to try out meditation, or, maybe I'm going to try out archery or any number of things. So that's what the group was about, to bring in a whole bunch of diverse experiences while still maintaining a level of confidentiality and privacy so that people can really be vulnerable and participate in disclosure. And as I said, take stuff out of the backpack, if not leave a backpack behind.
And how are you guys meeting? Is this an in-person thing? Is this a virtual session? How is it set up for you folks?
So it's a Zoom group. Since we're nationally spread out, I think we've got somebody from every time zone. We meet at 6:00 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday evenings via Zoom. And I typically will vet any new members with a phone call to make sure that, that there isn't an agency conflict, and also to make sure that they're in the right place to benefit with the group. I would say we are not a place for acute processing of trauma, and we're not a place that really addresses the substance abuse issues that be so common across our career, our jobs here. And, I want to make sure there's not somebody fake, trying to get in on the meeting. I want to make sure that they fit in, so that we have, that we maintain a group that people are comfortable enough to share, to laugh, and to cry, and to, at the end of the meeting, smile.
That smile being the key part there, huh?
Yes.
But I love this idea. I love that you're protecting the space you guys are creating. It's super important to be able to allow people that opportunity to be vulnerable and feel like they can share. Because I'm sure you're aware, once that trust is broken in the process of trying to heal, that does a lot of damage, right? Where the hardest part about seeking any type of support, therapy, etc., is taking that first step. And when we have a bad experience, it makes the process of seeking help a lot more challenging, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's, it's hard for us. A lot of the time, it was very hard for me to admit I needed help, to ask out for help. And then you finally get that, like, okay, I'm going to call for help.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're not taking patients. They're not specialized in it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't accept my insurance. They don't take workman's comp. And then you're just like, oh, this sucks. And then you find one and you think it's a good connection. And there's an honesty issue happens. And, whatever waiver you signed, the confidential shit you shared is all of a sudden being presented against you in your termination hearing. And you're like, wait, I thought that was protected and stuff.
Yeah.
So again, that's something that is really important to all of us in the group, is that we maintain it and that we can keep healing, because it is no fun to be hoodwinked or to be abandoned again when you're in the healing process.
And speaking of the healing process, you mentioned non-traditional practices like smudging, chakra work, EMDR, things of that nature. And for folks who maybe aren't familiar with non-traditional methods, what is important, what is relevant, how do these options benefit first responders?
That was probably one of the things that I mull over a lot. Before I graduated with a degree in philosophy and religion, I thought I was going to be a chemistry major. So I'm pretty, like hardcore science. And every time somebody shares one of these, I'll call it weird or woo things, I'm like, that's really stupid. Doesn't make any sense. Come on now. But depending on the practice, depending on what you're trying out, a lot of it's been are practices that are thousands of years old. I mean, I was anecdotally shared that EMDR came out of an ancient practice that taught children to roll their eyes 5 directions in one way, 5 the other way when they saw something that was traumatic thousands of years ago. And so a lot of these things are sort of been looked over, if you will, maybe ignored. And a lot of them have a lot of significant history backing up how effective they were and can be. Another part for me is like most of them aren't that hard to implement, to even just try out. Like, I mean, burning some incense and smudging yourself is like, it's going to cost you like $1 maybe. And to try it out. Or I first got exposed to equine therapy at Save a Warrior. I had a second experience at the Struggle Well experience at Boulder Crest Foundation. And then when I got back to Utah here, I found out there was a local organization, and I did 3 months of work with them and the horses. And if you would have told me like hanging out with the horse would have made me like a calmer, better, more grounded person, I would have like laughed at you. And the chakra work, both my psychiatrist and my therapist, I accuse them of being shamans. They both practice EMDR that has a chakra component to it. And sort of as we've processed several traumas, my significant traumas, I can feel it like move from my gut, move up through the body, and then feel like something I got to like brush away at the top of my head. Mm. And for a science-based guy to like feel that stuff and then feel like relieved and not have the traumas be intrusive and to not have nightmares anymore, and to be proactive with post-traumatic growth and being active and focusing about why events happened for me and not to me, I'm all for it. I mean, it's not a whole lot of effort. It's not, it's not an hour therapy session with your therapist. And so I think connecting to a lot of these ancient arts and ancient techniques is important. I think it may foster some tribal connections with it, which I spoke about earlier. There's a great book, I think it's Sebastian Junger, called Tribe, and talks about how the loss of tribe in modern society has affected us. And so creating kind of a connection that way of other practitioners of this weird stuff. And, even my first couple of EMDR sessions, I was just like, wow, that was magic. Or the first time that you do 4-7-8 breathing is pretty magical, or it was for me. Or to have the experience of walking in a labyrinth is really transformative. My understanding is when, knights came back from the Crusades, they walked into the labyrinth and they left their armor in the center. And for us to leave our headset and our mic or our backpack and our axe or our taser and our handgun in the center there, our helmet, our uniform, and to walk back out again is, again, I've done it 3 times, and gosh, it is just so empowering. So, I think a lot of these, non-traditional methods can have a lot of power and help complement the traditional talk therapy, traditional medical meds route. And I'm not saying that meds were part of my healing process. So I'm not saying don't do meds. And, there are, traditional based, what are they, programs, residential treatment programs that seem to be really helpful with people struggling with substance abuse and PTSD out there. And so it's different things to try on. And we all have different experiences from growing up until now. And not everything's going to resonate with us. So sharing those extra different things might cause somebody to try something that works for them where other things have failed. It might crack the door open. I started painting with acrylics after struggle well experience, and after initially OCD struggling over like what paint and brushes to buy and stuff. It is one of the coolest ways for me just to like lose 3 hours of time. And I'm not a good artist. I would get like D's and F's in art in elementary school. I don't think any of my paintings are fully significant, but they're cool and they're fun. And it's a great practice that somebody said, hey, look, I do this. Getting up and getting outside and getting the first light and the last light has some scientific basis as far as calming us down and helping with our sleep and getting our circadian rhythms. So I've just had enough things that have helped me along that I'm kind of like, check it out, try it out, go to YouTube and look for warrior meditation and go through the 45-minute YouTube and learn the meditation that was designed for, God, I think they came up with in like 2012, but it was for those of us that aren't predisposed to sitting around quietly for 22 minutes.
Yeah.
And then real quickly, it starts us with some finger tapping with a silent mantra. Then there's silent mantra breath work. Then there's breath work. And it's 3 phases. And I do with my insight timer. And you can knock out 20 minutes pretty quickly. And it has been such a foundational contribution to me getting better that I'm afraid not to do it.
Oh.
And I even like adapt, like say I'm in the doctor's office, which I don't like, or I'm somewhere else. I like might adapt the finger tap part of the meditation as just a little thing that I do. And it's a little bit deeper than, doing just a 4-7-8 in the breath work. I also love, and I don't know that much about it, but I love the South Pacific culture and their connection to nature. Love the Native American culture and their connections to nature. The Ho'oponopono prayer. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it goes, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. 11 words. And you can say it to yourself. You can say it to others. You can say it to society as a whole. You can say it to chill out a group of folks. It's got a lot of power. And so when my therapist shared that with me, kind of a non-traditional deal, and it resonated, I was like, hey, that's something pretty cool.
Yeah. And what's great about these things for folks who are listening and who are maybe they've tried traditional, therapy, didn't work out, or maybe they're wanting to do therapy but don't want a traditional type of setting, is that there are other options out there. And what is most important is just figuring out what works for you. What works for Jason is not going to be what works for me, so on and so forth. And be able to broaden, the scope of practice and try different things to figure out what works for you. Because There are so many options out there. And I think more often than not now, geared towards helping first responders specifically, that we should be taking advantage of them.
Absolutely. And again, some of it is a little weird, but as you said, a 12-step program works great for a lot of folks, but it doesn't work for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the wait list to get into a 5-day retreat is months, and you need something to do. Or the retreat, one of the things I've been on a mission of is finding out which retreats accept dispatchers and ski patrollers on there, because we're not your traditional firefighter cop on there. And so far I found 2. And I would encourage anybody. Warriors Ascent, based out of Kansas City, has applications open, and they'll accept ski patrollers and dispatchers. And there's First Responders Retreat based in Wisconsin that also would be happy to have ski patrollers and dispatchers join the group.
Very cool.
So I think of between, as a ski patroller, we would sit in the shack, and we at times functioned as dispatch, not with the same intensity that you all are exposed to. So I think I got a taste of it there. And then part of my apprenticeship as a firefighter with Salt Lake City was spending 8 hours in dispatch and actually taking the call, have the headset on, pushing the damn buttons. I don't know how the hell you all do it. Aside from all the other stuff that comes with the job on there. And so I feel a special kinship with y'all and understanding what stresses that you go through, and that even with, retreats not providing services, where you guys are in the first responder community.
We've definitely come a long way in acknowledging the realities of this side of the headset. And I mean, I always say, it's not about, this trauma Olympics, right? Where like, I hear it, you see it, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not, it's just, we are exposed. It just looks differently. And it just looks different. Same type of exposure, just packed on a little differently. I think the biggest example for me in law enforcement is, I might send my officer to an intense call. And if it is a call that requires investigation, requires like all these things, they're going to be sitting on that call for, 6, 7, 8 hours, maybe. They're dealing with that one call, heavy call. They're seeing it, smelling it, looking at it, whereas I took that call and now I'm dealing with another call, sending other officers to that call, dealing with another call, sending officers. So it's just different. Like, one isn't heavier than the other or weighs more than that. It's just different. And we're all here trying to work as a team to support the citizens who are calling for help, to make sure that the units that we're sending out there have the support they need, and so on and so forth. And we need to support the folks who are answering the phone as well.
Yeah, indeed. It's, it starts with you guys on there. And I'm glad to hear that, in your recruit school that you were shared several different techniques. I pulled 3 of my dispatcher friends and said, what would you guys wish to tell somebody that was getting started out? And, it ranged from don't take a call personally, maintain a level head, know when you need to take a break. One suggested she would have liked to have learned breath work earlier, a 4-7-8 or something, a quick way to decompress. about it, and to just make sure to build resiliency and take care of yourself, invest in yourself, if you will.
Yeah. I love the know when to take a break aspect of it, because it is hard, especially um, in a big standpoint, like take your vacation, and then even in the small standpoint when it's like, we have enough people on the floor, you need to walk out of this room where all the beeps and boops and triggers are happening that you don't even know are happening because you're just so used to being in the chaos. Like exiting that space. I think that's a hard thing for dispatchers to do sometimes, especially in centers where it's me, my partner, and maybe one other person, in the larger centers, I think it's a little easier to be like, all right, I'm out. See y'all in 15 minutes. In our smaller centers, I think it's a little harder for us to take that break that's well deserved, So I really resonate with that feedback your friend gave.
Yeah. And one thing it kind of triggered into me is if you think that a call affected you, then you probably should see somebody about it. And I like you calling it the trauma Olympics. I've been in groups where, it's like people have taken body count scores, or they've done this or that. One of the things that, well, first I'll say is what may affect one person because of either the situation, what the patient looked like, what the call was like, what their voice sounded like, what they were going through at that moment, that can have a much deeper impact than the same exact call into the same exact person on the next day. And so I've learned to respect that if a person has something that messed with them, they were traumatized, and they had a trauma, and that's, we're done with, counting and that. And part of one of the things I've tried to do in the Paths of the Warrior is we introduce ourselves with our name and like two things we like to do. Like I've dropped off the trauma. I was SWAT this, that for a million years. And, I was an ER surgeon in the helicopter that saved a million babies and an exploding bus. While I was on the bomb team, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
One, so that there isn't that like feeling of, oh, I did this, I burned out in 5 years. Other people went 30 years. Other people go longer on there. So that little feeling of like, oh, I didn't see enough. I've tried to remove from the meeting that component of it. It just takes one trauma to disrupt a person's life.
It does.
Unprocessed, it wreaks havoc.
Yeah. And I think that's super relevant for folks to hear, especially if you're a dispatcher who is just getting into this line of work. I think we've been conditioned to think that, I said it the other day, is like, some OG dispatchers want me to dispatch uphill barefoot in the snow because they did. And, it's not the same. We need to save that trauma for the trauma we're going to receive, just because it was harder, for you this amount of time back then versus now. Or I've been doing this 20 years and no call bothers me the way you're saying it, and you've been here 2 minutes. Like, it doesn't matter. It can happen at any point, 10 minutes in, 20 years in. It's the trauma's the trauma, and it doesn't take much for it to happen. It's not really a matter of if, it's just a matter of when and what level it's going to affect you and how prepared you are, to deal with it. Are we doing preventative measures, practicing breath work and things of that nature, doing therapy weekly to just unpack life in addition to the traumas that we're exposed to? A lot of the time we forget kind of the maintenance work of handling our trauma, which is if we work on it, have tools in place, have systems of support in place before the big incident happens, we're going to be more likely able to maneuver through them with those tools we've already worked into our tool belt.
Absolutely. Being proactive. One of my critical incidents, my officer, my captain said, "Hey guys, did that affect you? Did you need any help?" And of course, we're the manliest of manly men and we don't need any help. And as it turns out, our battalion chief was like, "That's not a serious call. You don't need a CISD." And I think out of almost any call I experienced, that one really needed some help on there. So I wish I would have recognized that hey, this call really messed with me. And even though I'm being manly in front of the crew, and even though we're not having a culturally competent CISD, CISM team come in, I should have done something about it. And as I've learned to kind of process and unpack some of these traumas, it's a lot harder to work on them after 20 years than it is if you deal with it, around the time of occurrence.
Yeah.
On there. So, taking that time and, going to the therapist and having them EMDR the experience for you. I've had a couple subsequent, experiences where I've gotten EMDR quickly, and it's it's not a mind erase, but it doesn't, for those of you all who haven't done EMDR, there's several versions of it, but it's not a mind erase, but it disconnects the emotional trigger to the event. And so it doesn't become intrusive anymore, and it doesn't cause triggers, and it doesn't participate in messing with sleep and stuff. So I highly encourage it. Get some help if you think something isn't sitting right with you.
Heck yeah. And for folks who are interested in joining your peer support group and the Path of the Warriors, how do they find you? How do they reach out? How do they join this group?
Right now you can find me, Jason Barto, on Facebook, and I usually post a weekly ad on it. You can send an email to responderfirst55@gmail.com and say, "Hey, I'm interested in the group," or keep an eye out on Instagram is what we're doing. I'm not the most sophisticated at social marketing, digital creation. So that's kind of, we're relying sort of on word of mouth and sort of primitive solicitation, and sometimes building alliances with other groups, but kind of spreading the word is probably the greatest challenge of running the group. Is letting people know that we're out there and that we're a resource for them.
Well, we're definitely going to include all that information in the description of this episode, and we're going to blast it out on our social media pages as well. Normally I ask folks at the end of the episode, what advice would you give someone who is aspiring to be a dispatcher in the public safety field, but you kind of already answered that. So I want to make it a little more specific to peer support, which is for the listeners who may be struggling, considering getting help, or maybe feeling like this isn't big enough for me to receive help. What advice would you give to them in sort of taking that first step into seeking any type of support services?
That's a good question, and it really depends where a person feels that they are at. I'd suggest that if a person is actively suicidally active, is considering it, has suicidal ideations, 988 is the first call. If not, followed up with a call to 911 to get those immediate resources moving to help out. There are some areas that have trained crisis response teams, but that's not always rapidly available. Secondly, I've learned that if you text the word badge, BADGE, to 741-741, you will get a text response from a person that is not a complete idiot, seems to be very supportive, and I thought was kind of helpful. I actually tested it out yesterday.
Okay.
And one of the things that was great, because I was struggling with an issue, and I also want to, vet and make sure what other people are going to go through. And I wanted to confirm the number. But it's from the Responder Strong organization. And it was great. And she hit me with a page of 75 things to do to calm yourself. Like 70, like simple, paint by numbers, walk with the dog. But that to me seemed to be a pretty quick resource that could have gotten somebody out of that acute crisis phase, and then provided them with different resources to help out. There's other groups out there. Runestone Ranch has a pretty rapid response time. The Responder Strong page has a whole bunch of different resources, from vetted clinicians to, again, this text hotline. And it was easy for me to share badge and 741-741 and feel comfortable to share that with you as something that somebody could use. Hopefully a person in crisis like that realizes that they do have some friends around them that do care about them very, very much. It's very hard at that time to reach out to those folks, and maybe as like a preparation, what to do is make sure you have 3 to 5 people that lift you up in your life, that are people that you aspire to be like, that are going to be there to support you, and be able to call those people. Connect with your local, if you have it available in your agency, your local peer support group. You may have an EAP intervention that's available. The IAFF also has training and intervention for firefighters and has a list of vetted clinicians that can help out. But it's a hard thing to say. And having been in that spot, I don't know how it resonates, but you are not alone out there. There is a bunch of us who give a shit about you.
That's right.
And realize that, reach out, join a peer support group, apply for a retreat, start meditation, try a bunch of peer support groups, out there, or, hit me with an email directly and say, I need to talk. There's also a couple of Facebook groups that are great to be on, PTSD for first responders and the sort. So there's a lot of great things, but I think that, realize there's a crisis and decide what level of attention it needs. And realize that you can move. the concept of post-traumatic growth is you can move from like, this sucks, to a euphoric, my life is fulfilled, I'm pretty happy place in life in spite of the challenges that were in your way. It's not a chronic sentence that has a negative outcome. You can start your way and you can make your way through it, and you can get to a point where you smile and you wake up in the morning and you're stoked. And for a lot of you, you're going to get to go back to work and enjoy what you were meant to do, and you can feel fulfilled. I mean, I will fully admit that out of my peer support group and out of talking to people that have been in a similar situation to me, I get a lot of resilient power out of that.
Mm.
I get a lot of healing.
Mm. That's amazing, Jason. Such great advice, such great resources. Being able to come on here, be vulnerable with me, a complete stranger, and share your story, I know is going to be super helpful for many people. But I think when we come on and share our stories, we know that just helping one person is enough. So thank you so much for coming on to the show today and sharing your truth and your healing with us.
Now, thanks for having me, and thanks for taking on the burden of sharing all of this great information on social media and getting other people to learn about it, get other people to realize that there isn't a stigma to getting help. And our mind is just like our muscles. We got to exercise them and take care of them and take care of our physical body if we're going to do our job. And if we don't, we're not much help to anybody.
Heck yeah, that's the truth. Well, we will include all the information to get in contact with Jason in the description of this episode. Again, Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Ashley. Peace out.
See ya. All right, everybody. That genuinely was another amazing episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch. And genuinely, I'm going to keep saying that word, it seems, a great way to head into 2025. If your tank is a little on E, if you haven't even checked in on what level your tank is at, it's a good time to do so. Going into the new year with maybe a new peer support group, whether it is virtually with some awesome resources like Jason has available, or through your work or any programs that you have available. We have had a bunch of folks come on to the show talking about the different resources they have available for you folks out there in the first responder world. But the main point is figuring out what works for you, taking care of yourself so we can continue to take care of others. And of course, Happy New Year. And until 2025, everyone, stay raspy. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.